Consider a simple comparison. An investor who makes zero portfolio changes over 20 years, contributing consistently to a diversified index fund portfolio, historically outperforms the vast majority of investors who actively trade, chase trends, or try to time market entries and exits. Not because doing nothing is clever, but because every unnecessary transaction introduces a new opportunity for fees, taxes, and emotional error to creep in. There's a quiet irony buried in this. The financial media, almost by design, rewards activity. Bold predictions get clicks. Dramatic warnings get shared. Nobody builds a following by saying, keep doing exactly what you are already doing. And so the loudest voices in personal finance are, more often than not, the ones with the least useful advice for someone who has already reached $750,000 and simply needs to stay the course. This is the paradox almost nobody wants to hear. After $750,000, the version of you that got you here, hungry, active, constantly optimizing, can become the very thing that costs you the next chapter. Let's return to our 5 people, 20 years after that number first appeared on their screens. John, who made the psychological shift early, diversifying his portfolio, automating his contributions, keeping a cash reserve and largely ignoring daily market noise, watched his $750,000 grow to just over $2.6 million, aided by consistent low-cost investing and simply staying the course through 2 market downturns without selling. Sarah, whose lifestyle quietly absorbed her growing income, ended up with roughly $1.1 million, respectable, but nearly $1.5 million less than she could have had, purely because her spending kept pace with her earning. Michael, still paying that 1.8% advisory fee 2 decades later, reached approximately $1.3 million. Solid growth, but a stark reminder of what fees silently consume over time. Emily, after her painful lesson in concentration and sequence of returns risk, eventually rebuilt a more diversified portfolio in her mid-50s. She recovered well, ending around $1.9 million, but lost nearly a decade of compounding to a mistake that better diversification would have prevented entirely. And David, who panic sold during that 18% correction and never fully returned to a disciplined strategy, ended up around $980,000, barely above where he started, despite 2 decades of a rising market that, statistically, should have carried him much further. Same starting point, wildly different outcomes, not because of intelligence, not because of income, because of behavior. Sustained quietly, decision after decision, year after year. So why does this number matter so much? Why not $1 million? Why not $500,000? Because $750,000 sits at a specific, uncomfortable intersection. It's substantial enough that market movements genuinely rival or exceed your income. But it's not yet so large that mistakes feel forgiving. It's the zone where the consequences of bad habits become mathematically serious, while the temptation to keep behaving like a beginner remains dangerously strong. This is the moment the entire game quietly changes. From earning to protecting, from accumulation to preservation, from hoping the market goes up to planning for the fact that eventually it won't. Most people never notice the moment it happens. They keep doing what got them here, assuming more of the same will keep working. Sometimes it does. Often, as we've seen, it doesn't. The 5 people in this story didn't fail because they lacked knowledge available somewhere on the internet. They failed when they failed because knowing something and acting on it consistently, especially under pressure, are 2 entirely different skills. The investors who protect their wealth aren't smarter. They're simply more honest with themselves about what fear, comfort, and overconfidence can quietly do to a plan. If there's one thing this story asks you to sit with, it's this: the habits that build your first $750,000 are not the same habits that protect the next one. Recognizing that difference and acting on it before the market forces the lesson on you is the quiet, unglamorous work of actually staying wealthy. Somewhere tonight, someone's account is going to quietly cross that same line John crossed. $750,000, glowing on a phone screen in an otherwise dark room. They won't feel different. Nothing around them will change. And that's exactly the danger, because the moment that matters most rarely announces itself. It simply arrives and waits to see what you do next. The first $750,000 is built by effort. The next million is protected by patience. Have you noticed that the hardest part of your journey seems to be happening right before something important? What if the obstacle frustrating you today isn't punishment, but the final barrier before a completely new chapter begins? Before you scroll away, stay with me. Because what many spiritual traditions say about moments like this may completely change the way you see your life right now. You didn't click on this video by accident. Something in you is tired. Something in you is also waiting. And tonight we're going to talk about why. Think about the last few weeks of your life. Has something felt heavier than usual? A little more tense? A little more uncertain? You're not imagining it. Across generations, in cultures on every continent, people have noticed the same strange pattern. Right before something meaningful shifts in a person's life, things often get harder, not easier. Many spiritual and personal growth traditions describe this as the final obstacle. Some call it the last test. Others call it the dark, before the dawn. It isn't proven, it isn't a law of physics, but it's a pattern so many people have lived through that it's worth pausing on. Some interpret this as a kind of emotional filtering, as if life is asking a quiet question. Are you ready for what comes next? Not because you have to earn your future, but because the version of you who's about to step into something new needs to release the version of you who's still holding on to something old. You may notice this in your own story if you look closely enough. The relationship that ended right before you found real peace. The job that fell apart right before a better path opened. The health scare that made you finally slow down and listen to your body. None of this proves anything mystical is happening. But it does raise a question worth sitting with. What if the hardest chapter you're in right now isn't the ending you fear? What if it's the doorway you haven't recognized yet? And that question brings us to something many people have been quietly feeling about this exact week. There's something about midsummer that feels different than any other time of year. The days are long. The air is heavy with heat and stillness, and for many people this particular date, July 21st, seems to carry a certain emotional weight. Now, to be clear, no date on a calendar holds guaranteed spiritual power. July 21st isn't magic, but many people use symbolic moments like this. A certain date, a certain season, a certain turning point as a mirror. A reason to stop and actually look at their life instead of rushing past it. Some spiritual traditions suggest that midsummer represents the peak of light before a season of harvest. A moment where everything you've been quietly building starts to show itself, not created out of nowhere. Revealed? Hey, maybe that's why so many people report feeling unusually reflective around this time. Old memories resurfacing, unexpected clarity about relationships, a pull to finally deal with something they've been avoiding. You might feel it too, a subtle sense that something in you is ready to let go, even if you can't name exactly what it is yet. This isn't about believing in fate. It's about noticing that you have a choice right now, in this ordinary week, to actually pay attention to your own life. And that choice might matter more than any date ever could. So if July 21st feels different to you this year, as what if that feeling isn't coincidence but invitation? And if you're being invited into something, how would you even know? What would it actually look like? That's where the next part of this comes in. Many people describe a series of quiet shifts right before real change takes hold. Not fireworks, not dramatic moments, just small, strange signals that something inside them is loosening. Here are 7 of them. See how many feel familiar. Picture a woman named Sarah. For nearly a year, she carried a low, constant hum of anxiety about her job, her finances, her future. She woke up tense. She went to bed tense. And then, one Tuesday morning, without any real explanation, she woke up and felt lighter. Nothing outside her life had changed, but something inside her had. Many people describe this exact experience, a calm that arrives before the circumstances actually improve. Some interpret this as the mind and spirit settling before the next chapter begins, like the stillness right before sunrise. But as if you felt an unexpected wave of peace recently, even for a few hours, it might be worth asking yourself, what shifted inside me, even if nothing outside me has changed yet? Because that calm you're feeling, it might be trying to tell you something. Sometimes it isn't dramatic. No fight, no falling out, just distance. A friend who stops texting back. A coworker relationship that quietly fades. A family member who feels further away than before. This can feel confusing, even painful. But many spiritual traditions suggest that as you grow, your life naturally recalibrates around who you're becoming, not just who you've been. Think of someone in your own life who drifted away recently. At the time, it may have felt like a loss, but ask yourself honestly, did that space ever get replaced with something better? A new friendship, a deeper connection with yourself, more time and energy for what matters? You may notice this pattern more than once in your life. People leaving right when you're becoming someone new. And if that's happening to you right now, what is the space they're leaving actually making room for? Nobody enjoys waiting. A delayed job offer, a relationship that hasn't moved forward, a dream that seems to be taking far longer than it should. But many people look back on their most frustrating delays and realize something important. The timing protected them from something they couldn't see at the time. Imagine a man named David, who spent 2 years trying to buy a house that kept falling through. At the time, it felt like failure after failure. A year later, interest rates changed, the market shifted, and the house he eventually bought turned out to be a better fit for his life than anything he tried to buy before. Some interpret delays like this as a kind of quiet protection. Not punishment, not a no, just a not yet. If something in your life feels stuck right now, what if it's not because you're failing, but because you're being repositioned for something you can't fully see yet? The same number appearing again and again. A song that seems to play at exactly the right moment, a stranger's comment that mirrors something you'd been quietly wondering about. Coincidences like this don't prove anything supernatural is happening. But many people find that these small moments encourage them to slow down and pay closer attention to their lives. And that attention itself can be powerful. Some spiritual traditions suggest that repeating patterns are less about hidden messages and more about training your mind to notice meaning where you used to rush past it. Have you had a moment recently that felt oddly timed or strangely specific? You don't have to explain it. You just have to ask what it made you feel and what it made you consider. Because sometimes the message isn't in the coincidence itself. It's in the pause it creates. There's a particular fear you've probably been carrying for a long time. Maybe it's the fear of being alone, the fear of failing publicly, the fear of not being enough. Many people describe a strange moment where that fear, the one that used to control their decisions, suddenly feels smaller. Not gone, but just quieter. Think about a fear that used to stop you in your tracks a year ago. Does it still have the same power over you today? For many people, the answer is no, even if they can't point to the exact moment it changed. As some interpret this softening as evidence of quiet inner growth, the kind that happens so gradually you don't notice it until you look back. If an old fear feels less overwhelming than it used to, that's not nothing. That's evidence you've already been changing, even during the hardest parts of this year. A conversation that leads somewhere unexpected, a door that opens after months of closed ones, an idea that suddenly feels achievable instead of impossible. Many people notice that right after a long period of struggle, new opportunities seem to appear almost out of nowhere. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because they became more able to see and receive what was already forming around them. I think of someone who spent years feeling stuck in the same routine. And then, seemingly overnight, a new opportunity appeared that changed everything. In most cases, it wasn't overnight at all. It was the result of quiet effort finally meeting the right moment. If something new has been showing up in your life lately, a message, an idea, an invitation, what if it's not random? What if it's the result of everything you've already been building, whether you realized it or not? This might be the quietest sign of all, and maybe the most important, a growing sense that you don't need everyone else's approval to move forward, a quiet confidence that you know what's right for you, even if you can't fully explain it yet. Many spiritual traditions describe this stage as the moment right before real transformation, when a person stops looking outward for permission and starts listening inward for direction. Have you noticed yourself trusting your own instincts more lately? Making decisions that used to feel terrifying with a little more ease? That shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens after you've survived enough hard seasons to finally believe in your own resilience. And if you're feeling that pull right now, it might be the clearest sign yet that you're closer to your next chapter than you think. So if some of these signs feel familiar, what should you actually do with that awareness? Not force anything, not rush anything. Just a few grounded, healthy practices that many people find helpful during moments like this. First, slow down before making major decisions. When you're in the middle of change, it's tempting to make big sweeping choices quickly, quitting a job, ending a relationship, moving across the country. Give yourself permission to wait even just a few days before acting on something significant. Clarity tends to arrive after the emotional intensity settles, not during it. The decision that feels urgent today often looks different a week from now. Second, spend time journaling or sitting in quiet reflection. You don't need an elaborate ritual, just 5 honest minutes with a notebook. Or even your own thoughts, asking yourself, what am I really feeling right now and why? Some people write freely without editing themselves. Others simply sit in silence and notice what surfaces. Either way, the goal isn't to find an answer immediately. It's to stop avoiding the question. That's third, release resentment where you can. This doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt or rushing to forgive before you're ready. It means choosing not to let old pain keep making decisions for you. Some people find that writing a letter they never sent is enough to loosen resentment's grip. Others talk it through with someone they trust. The goal isn't to excuse what happened, it's to stop carrying it into whatever comes next. Fourth, focus on gratitude, even for small things. Not as a magic formula that guarantees a reward, as a way of training your attention toward what's actually going right, so which is often more than it feels like in a hard season, a warm meal, a working car, a friend who checked in. Small acknowledgements like these can quietly shift how heavy the rest of your day feels. Fifth, stay open to unexpected opportunities. Not every door will look the way you imagined it. Some of the most important shifts in people's lives came through paths they never would have chosen on purpose. An unplanned conversation, a random invitation, a change they initially resisted. These aren't guaranteed paths to a miracle. There's no formula that promises a specific outcome, but many people find that practicing these habits helps them feel steadier, clearer, and more prepared, whatever comes next. Would you like me to update this directly in the file, or keep it here for you to paste in yourself? Maybe the obstacle you're facing isn't there to stop you. Maybe it's revealing the strength you've been building all along. Think about everything you've already survived to get to this exact moment, watching this video on this ordinary day, quietly wondering if something bigger is unfolding in your life. You didn't get here by accident. You got here by continuing, even when continuing was hard. Think back to a version of you from a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. If that version of you could see where you are right now, they might be surprised by how much you've carried and how much you're still standing after all of it. That isn't nothing. That's proof of something quietly powerful in you, something that doesn't always announce itself but never really stops working. Whether your next breakthrough arrives tomorrow, next month, or much later than you'd like, every step you take with courage shapes the person you're becoming. Not the person you were before the hard season started. Someone new. Someone shaped by everything you've had to face. You don't need certainty to keep moving forward. You just need willingness. You don't have to know exactly how things will unfold. You don't have to have every answer figured out tonight. You just have to keep showing up, one honest step at a time, even when the path ahead feels unclear. So take a breath. Let go of what you can't control, and trust that the chapter you're in right now, however difficult, might be preparing you for something you can't fully see yet. Not because life owes you an easy ending, but because you've already shown over and over that you know how to keep going. Maybe this obstacle isn't the end of your story. Maybe it's the quiet turning point you'll look back on someday, the moment right before everything started to make sense. You won't always be in this exact place. This feeling, this weight, this waiting, it's not permanent. It's part of a longer story that's still being written. Keep moving forward. Your story is still unfolding. If this message resonated with you even a little, leave a comment saying, "I choose hope." Let it be a small reminder to yourself and to anyone else reading that you are not facing this alone. If this video brought you comfort, take a moment to like it. It helps this message reach someone else who might need it today. Subscribe for more uplifting spiritual stories like this one, and consider sharing it with someone who's been quietly struggling lately. You never know how much timing matters until it's exactly what someone needed to hear.